Again, welcome to our families that have joined us this morning. And the title of this particular workshop is Understanding and Embracing Inclusion, a workshop for families with children participating in inclusion preschool classrooms. Um, there are three individuals that are facilitating today. My name is Wanda Roundtree, and I'm the Preschool Inclusion Coordinator.
And good morning, everyone. My name is Hillary Talmadge. I am a special education coordinator, but I also am the site administrator here at Vineland Preschool. So I'm so glad you could join us.
And good morning. My name is Heriberto Soto. I work as a coordinator for family community engagement, and I'll be sort of in the background sending out messages and communicating for our families on the Zoom.
So here's a saying that I wanted to share with you this morning. Inclusion is not bringing people together, and in this case, students, young students, into what already exists. It is making a new space, a better space for everyone. And that was quoted, I'm quoting George Day on that. So it's about making, inclusion is about sort of redoing, if you will, the physical space for children, and to be very mindful of the interactions and the relationships, not only between students and teachers, but also between children and their peers. So for the agenda, we just had welcome and introductions. We'll talk a little bit about some expectations in just a few moments. Going to have a connecting activity. So that'll be an opportunity to get some feedback from you all with regard to inclusion, exclusion feelings. We're going to watch a very interesting video, the Ian cartoon video. Going to talk a little bit about the IEEEP grant, the Inclusion Early Education Expansion Grant that Twin Rivers received in 2020. We're going to hopefully broaden your understanding around inclusion. We talk about the what of inclusion and the why of inclusion, and then how do we collaborate better to make certain that we have improved inclusion outcomes for all of our children. We're going to do a very brief gallery walk of the TRUSD's preschool inclusion classrooms, and then there'll be opportunities for questions or any thoughts or comments. So just so that we're all on the same page, if you will, we want you to please feel free to engage freely. Whatever comes to the top of your mind, please feel free to share. We would like for you to unmute and share at any point in time. Please keep your camera on if you can, but if you prefer not, we're fine with that as well. Please assume good intentions based on any comments that might be shared this morning, and please give others an opportunity to share as well. If you need to take care of your business, any bio breaks, or if you need to log off for a few moments and then return, that's fine. Are there any other considerations that before we proceed with the presentation? Anything else coming from our participants?
I'm good.
Okay, alrighty. Okay, thank you. Let's go to the next one. All right, so this is our connecting activity. So what I'd like for you to do just for a few moments is to think about a time in your life when you felt that you didn't fit in. Perhaps you felt alone or that you didn't belong. And this could be a recent memory or something that occurred years ago, recent or distant memory. What feelings did you experience at that time? Did any persons come to your rescue to make you feel more included? If yes, what was said or done at that point in time? If no one came to your rescue, what do you wish someone would have said or done? And last but not least, we are going to ask each of you to drop into the chat, if you will, any word or any phrase that comes to mind when you think about how it feels to be excluded. And so we'd like for you to write, again, your responses in the chat. So we're going to give you a few moments. We were going to break out, but I think we have a small enough group where we all can engage at the same time. And so I'm going to give you some time just to think about it. Just think about a memory that you've had at any point in your life. And we've all experienced feelings of exclusion. How did you feel about it? And did anyone come to your aid at all? And if they didn't, what would you have wanted them to do at the time that you were feeling very excluded? And then think about a word or a phrase that comes to mind when you think about being excluded. So just think about it, and please just feel free to share, okay?
Embarrassed.
So Chia, there you felt embarrassed. Do you want to share a little bit with us about the particular incident?
Actually, it's an incident from my childhood.
Yes.
I think it was around, I would say 6th or 7th grade.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't realize, I think, well, I knew at the time, you know, my name was associated with a plant that grew.
Mm-hmm.
And so at the time I was made fun of, my name was made fun of.
Mm-hmm.
And it made me feel very embarrassed to have that name.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like nobody wanted to be my friend,
Mm-hmm.
or, you know, nobody wanted to be around someone who has a weird name. And so, and that's how I felt at that time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's something I don't want anyone to go through,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's a kid or an adult.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Chia,
Mm-hmm.
for sharing with us that very personal story of feeling excluded. Anyone else care to share?
I'll share a story I know so that to kind of not put the spotlight on our participants too much. So I grew up here in the district in North Highlands. And when I say I grew up in North Highlands, I pretty much never left North Highlands my entire life. And then I went off to school in Los Angeles. And I went to a college where the majority of the people around me had very different experiences growing up. And it was extremely hard the first 2 years, only because I didn't have the resources that the other students had, adult students. They didn't really understand why I had multiple jobs or why I had to do the things I did. And I felt very like a fish out of water. And I did not feel welcomed at all. And I cried every day for the first year that I was in college. But I did have someone that did come to my rescue. And she made me feel welcomed and invited me to things and tried to include me in events, and really understood that I was feeling very homesick and very left out and out of my element. And so I'm so thankful to have her to this day. And I don't know what I would have done if she wasn't there, because it would have been very, very, very hard to get through even 4 years. So I totally understand feeling left out. And that's just one little kind of adult example, I guess I would say I would have. And I know other people have even more impactful examples in their life. So, but I'm thankful for her. And I think if she wouldn't have come to my rescue, I don't know how I would have, made it through. And I see Heriberto says the same thing, that he grew up in. Okay, so you had the opposite. So maybe we should have switched. You should have went to school in LA. Maybe I should have stayed here. But yeah, so those kind of little angels in our life make us feel connected and help us get through hard times.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. And we're also reminded in the telling of your story, Hillary, that oftentimes angels can come in the form of children and they can come in the form of adults. And so that's the wonderful and that's the blessing behind it. Did everyone get a chance to jot down a phrase or a word that comes to mind when you experience feelings of exclusion? I said, someone said, I'm still thinking. Okay, great, just continue. Someone said, Chia said embarrassed and hurt. I said very sad. Hillary said lonely. Okay, thank you. Thank you for sharing. So we're skipping the breakout session because we just did it as a group. Okay, so here is I think it's a wonderful video, which really, I think it talks a bit about being and the feelings that come with exclusion. And I want you to just, for this particular, at this particular time, just to watch the video carefully and the process, what you see. And then we're going to have another opportunity to revisit the video briefly later on in this presentation. So you'll just keep some of the kinds of scenes from this particular video sort of close to heart and mind. And then we'll revisit and talk a little bit more about the video at a later time. Okay, thank you. Okay, so I just want you to hold some thoughts about that particular video in mind. I just want to share a little bit with you about TRUSD's Inclusion Early Education Expansion Program so that you are apprised of this new initiative. In 2020, Twin Rivers Unified School District was awarded $1.2 million over the course of the next 4 years for inclusive education for preschool youngsters. The particular grant allows Twin Rivers to increase enrollment of children with mild, moderate, and significant disabilities. There is also a real focus on preschool inclusion. So meaning that children with and without IEPs are learning together in the same classroom. So all children, if you will, are included in the same preschool classroom. There are also opportunities to build effective relationships with community partners and service providers. That grant provides us an opportunity for some outreach into the community so that individuals can help and support us in providing very important services to our children with IEPs or with individualized education program plans. We also were provided funding for classroom adaptive materials and supplies and equipment. We also have the wonderful opportunity of consulting with a Sacramento State University associate professor, Dr. Cindy Collado, and she has very specific expertise in the area of early childhood education and special education as well. And then finally, the grant affords us an opportunity to provide ongoing professional learning and coaching support for our teachers who are teaching in our inclusive preschool classrooms. Next. We have at this particular point in time, and we hope to grow over time, we have 6 preschool inclusion sites. Maury actually has 2 inclusion classrooms, Oakdale, Orchard, Village, Vineland, and Castory.
All right, thank you, Wanda. So some of you may already know this if you have had or have a student in special education, but we are guided by a federal law called IDEA, which is the Individuals with Disabilities Act. It was revised in 2004. It really, the heart of this law ensures that all students have available to them free and appropriate public education. If you've ever been in an IEP meeting for special education, you may have heard the acronym FAPE. That's what it stands for, the offer of FAPE, of free and appropriate public education. So we always specify that in any services that we are providing as a district to a student based on their needs does not have a cost or a fee to it. And all students, regardless of how significant their needs are, has a right to an appropriate public education that ensures that they will make some kind of progress towards the needed areas and their goals. The other piece of that law is you'll also hear this term, LRE. That refers to the least restrictive environment. So in part of that law, when we're looking at FAPE, which is essentially the services offered to a student based on their needs, we're looking at what would be the least restrictive environment. And the way that I explain this to people that are new to special ed is we're looking at providing the student with the most access to a general education environment, which is a typical regular classroom that we're all familiar with. So what becomes more restrictive is when we're pulling students out of that environment, maybe into a special day class, as we call them, that is 100% made of students on an IEP. We even have our most restrictive placement that we have a few students are group home type facilities, or we even have some students placed out of the state because we don't have options available in the state, but that's very, very rare. So that would be the most restrictive. And so we are always trying to get that least restrictive option for students. So if we go to the next slide, just kind of a visual to show this. So really, when we think about services, my mind always thinks that it's a kind of a linear model where we have a student in general education here, and they move more restrictive until they're taken out. But really what this model is showing is on the outside of the circle, those letters written in, or those words in red, are all of the different kinds of services or supports that we provide students through the IEP process. So at the bottom, specialized academic instruction, that's to support their academic development. But we also have related services, and those could be speech therapy. We have some students in need of occupational therapy, physical therapy, depending on if we are placing students well outside of their home area, we may provide transportation to the student as a related service. On the sides of the circle, it's always important that we can provide supplementary aids and or accommodations or modifications. So what that means is students may need additional support that's not tied to a direct service, or they may need accommodations in the classroom, such as frequent breaks. Maybe some of our students that have hearing loss, maybe they need to be seated strategically in the classroom to maximize that input that they're getting. Maybe they need specialized equipment to hear the instruction because of that hearing loss. The list goes on and on and on. But the way that this reads is all of those services on the outside can really be provided to all of these settings in the green on the inside. So you see the outside green is all general education, and then it goes into where we have an outside district offer a FAPE or a student that's placed in a non-public setting or a group home or residential care. And like I said, that's rare, but it does happen. And so the purpose that our department created this is to show that you can provide all of those in all of the settings. So just because a student has multiple service needs, multiple accommodations, doesn't necessarily mean that they need to be taken out of their class to receive those. So we have options there. So moving on to the next slide, just continuing to define that inclusion. You know, I'm not going to read the whole piece of this here, but really the end result is what I want to highlight is we want to make students with or without a disability, all students feel welcomed, have a sense of belonging. We want to start those friendships early on, because we know that students build those early friendships in preschool and kindergarten, and oftentimes they keep them through high school, right? We want our students to feel like they're part of a community. So our students with disabilities, they, depending on the level of disability, they do continue with us till age 22 in some cases. And so we want them to have friends in the community, to be able to go on community outings, to know people. So that's just really what we're looking at when we have inclusion. The next slide gives a really nice visual of this, and I love pictures more than I love words. So you can see where we have the different models below that some may call inclusion, but we're going to point out that they're not necessarily, they're not at all. So inclusion is really that first bubble at the top where we have all different kinds of students mixed in, the green dots, the orange dots, the red dots, whatever the disability or whatever the need is, they're all mixed in and they're learning together as part of a group and building, and nobody is looked upon as different. Everyone is included. You see the circles under. Exclusion is really, you have that main core group, but then you have these outliers and they're not able to participate in the activities. They have to go off and kind of be separate. And they're all over the place. And then you have segregation, where we're specifically taking a group and making their own new bubble for them and not allowing them to be in the main group. And then this term integration, you may have heard this as well when we talk about inclusion, but really integration is not taking a group and keeping them in a group, placing them in the class, right? We want to see kids moving around the classroom in the same groups together, not necessarily being separated into a small group the entire day away from their peers. We want them to have access to activities. And we're going to talk a little bit more about those access pieces and supports a little bit later.
Hillary, just let me interrupt for one moment. I
Sure.
do want to take the opportunity to welcome, I should say, Reina Chuleta, who has just joined us. And Reina, we're so happy that you've taken time out of your very busy schedule to join us today. And we're talking about inclusion. At the end of the presentation, you may have some questions since you missed some pieces, but so feel free to ask those questions. Again, thank you for joining us today, Reina.
All right. So moving on to the next slide, I'd like to, if we have any brave souls out there, I'd like to hear a little bit from you. So we've talked about, we've seen a video that put it visually for us, but we've also talked about inclusion being, inclusion is not about making students with disabilities fit the norm. So it's not making them change their ways or making a certain subset of students fit in. It's breaking down the barriers and creating an environment where everyone automatically feels welcomed from day one, right? So we don't want the person to feel, and we shared this at the beginning, when you feel like you're the outcast, you feel like you don't fit in, right? But it's not necessarily, it's not you, it's the environment. And so we want to change that environment so that it's automatically welcoming. So I want to take a break here from me talking. And if there's any brave souls that want to talk about the video, what stood out to you in this video? And why do you think it's important to provide inclusive opportunities starting early on in the preschool years?
I think that the younger people, well, as long as like children, they have like a less filter than like we are. So building up that non-excluding environment when they're younger could be a lot more, I don't know, helpful for like everyone when they grow up, is what I think.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Ms. Watanabe. I agree 100%. Teaching our young learners to be accepting of people that may be different from them early on is going to have a great impact later in life and in our world. So thank you for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, my name is Chia. I actually did not see the video. I'm driving, so I didn't see the video, but I did see that they put a link in there, which I will watch later. So I don't know what the general part of the video, but I did wanted to share my own child's current learning journey with one of the schools right now, which I'm very happy that she is at that school. You know, it's a small class, 10 students roughly. And I just wanted to say how great, you know, like I think children don't judge, you know, they just have questions. And I think that it's great that, you know, how my daughter is actually special needs. And she is, you know, physically they could see that, you know, she's different. She's in a wheelchair. And so they don't see it as different. They still treat her like she's one of them. They want to play with her. They are curious. They ask questions. And I think that's okay. I think it's okay. I think it's great that they're curious. They want to know. And I think, you know, as adults or teachers, that, you know, they're able to explain like, okay, you know, this is Grace. That's my daughter's name. I don't know if I could share it, but I'm okay with that. And she's, you know, and just to share the experience with other children, I think they're more open and they don't see anything that's wrong with her. And I just, you know, I just think that's like beautiful, children, you know, not seeing the difference. Mm-hmm. And I think it helps when they're in that age that they're exposed to it so that they are less afraid of it. I think that's what it is. People are afraid of things that they don't know.
Chia, thank you so much for sharing. I am very much aware of your daughter. I visit the classroom often, and she is certainly a delight every time I visit. The one thing I did want to share with families about this whole inclusion idea is that what we already know is that children with disabilities, children who are developing differently, they're already fully included within the context of their families. And their families are already doing a superb job providing the necessary accommodations and supports to children. I think the challenge is once children start growing up and they start entering school, we have to do a lot better in terms of including them, fully including them in our classrooms. And so I just wanted to share that thought. And that's certainly every time I watch this Ian video, that is certainly what comes to mind. And certainly just how adaptable children are and how responsive they are and how sensitive they are. And it really echoes, I think, your point, Ms. Thao, when you share that, you know, people sometimes are afraid of what they don't know. And so once they become familiar, then it's just so much easier for people to embrace and to support others, and particularly children with disabilities. Okay. Hillary, are you?
Yep.
Okay.
All right, Wanda, you want me to go through these ones?
Oh, yes, okay. So that's it. I forgot that's me, and then you'll add some. Thank you. So access is very, so there are three very, very important or essential components, I should say, with regard to inclusion. The first thing is access, and that is just simply providing a range of activities and environments for every child by removing any physical barriers and offering multiple ways to promote learning and development. And so when I was mentioning about accommodations that we provide for these youngsters within the context of the early childhood classroom. So I was wondering, in terms of access, would any of our parents like to share what this currently looks like for your child in our inclusion classroom? If you have a child in our inclusion classroom, would anyone like to share how access looks like? Are we doing a relatively good job removing any physical barriers and providing the necessary accommodations so that we can provide quality learning experiences for your youngster? Anyone care to share?
Do you mean the classroom setting? Or
yes, within the classroom setting, yes.
It's hard for me to tell if the classroom setting is, or my child is having a great time at school. He loves school, so like I'm pretty sure the setting is great. But it's hard for me to tell us. We can't really get to know what is like because of this whole pandemic thing.
Yes, that's true too. That is true. And I'm glad that you made that point. I know parents don't necessarily have the access that they once had, but we're hopeful in the future we'll get back to that, and we certainly will encourage that for all of our parents, those parents with children typically developing, those children who have disabilities. And so we want everyone to be together and to be very much included. Thank you. Any other thoughts around access?
Say something in for my daughter. She's actually in one of the inclusion classes, and she has a few special, I guess therapies, you could say, that she does at the school. And I'm actually very pleased with everything that is being provided for her. I also am more aware of a lot of things because my daughter does have a health nurse that is with her. Mm-hmm. And so I'm able to get kind of like, okay, this is, kind of like a detail of her day, a breakdown of her day. And I love that the school that she is attending they have, you know, assemblies on Wednesdays, and they include the entire school. So she's able to see, you know, more than just her classroom, or, you know, she's able to see like a bigger picture. But I'm very pleased with the access currently. You know, it is hard with, you know, certain restrictions now because of COVID and, you know, all these things in place. But I'm glad that we get these alerts. The school's been really great about like giving us information, and that if I needed anything, I can go to her teachers in regards to questions and concerns. So if there was something that, you know, that was concerning to me, I have already reached out to the teacher, and they're able to provide me feedback, or, you know, their options. You know, one of my fear as a mom of someone, my kid who's immunocompromised, is that we're getting into flu season, and you know, I'm in connection with the teacher and the school, so I think it's great. I think as a parent, you have to just really search for it. I don't know how to say it, but I think, you know, I think as parents, I think we just need to sometimes look for it, because maybe the answers aren't always clear, and we just have to reach out to the school district, because I think that they've been really responsive.
Oh, great. That is good to hear. Hillary, any other thoughts around access?
I think Miss Tao can come present with us, because she said all the things that I was thinking about. Just,
Yes.
I mean, even the basic, do they have access to the same schedule? That may sound like, oh, that's a given, but it's really not. So for years and years, you know, students, a lot of times students that had more significant support needs had a separate schedule, separate recess, separate lunch. So access really starts at that basic level. And that's kind of what you talked about, Mrs. Tao, is, you know, are they invited to the same assemblies, and are there accommodations for them to attend in that whole group if that's challenging for them? So you said it perfect. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing. Next, as we move along, so participation. That is, again, another very important component of fully inclusive experience for youngsters. So when we talk about participation, simply means using a range of instructional approaches to promote engagement in play and learning tasks, and a sense of belonging for every child. And so the participation ultimately should make the child feel, on some level or another, a real sense of belonging, a real sense of being included. Any thoughts coming from any parents about a participation and how it may currently look? And again, I do recognize that you have limited access to the classroom because of the COVID situation that we're in. But any other thoughts around participation? Do you get a sense that your child is participating fully? Any thoughts? Okay.
I'd love to give I can give some examples. And so as I've been teaching over the years, inclusion has kind of become more and more of a topic through the years. So I'm able to see kind of the things that have gone on in classrooms to provide more participation. And so one of the things that we want lots of access to visual supports or alternative modes of communication, because what we find is just because students have limited or no verbal abilities, it doesn't mean that they do not have a voice inside, that they are not able to respond to questions, be part of the group. So participation to me for our kiddos is providing, bridging that gap, communication gap, because a lot of times they are able to interact with other students. They are able to have, you know, many conversations. They just may need to be facilitated by a device or facilitated by pictures to help. And that's something that maybe, you know, 15, 20 years ago, we didn't see a lot of in the classroom. And it's a much more hotter topic for speech therapists now. But I'm also thinking about, you know, participation goals. it used to be, and it still can be practiced depending on the goal, to pull a student out and work on those goals. But now more and more, especially our students that are coming out of their teaching credential programs in recent years, are being trained on something you may hear: participation plans. How do we infuse that goal work into the classroom so they're not being pulled out of the class? So they're getting that support. They're not missing instruction. They're hearing the instruction and having support in the moment. So those are the kind of things that our universities are starting to teach. Not starting, they've been doing it for many years actually. And that we're really, as Twin Rivers, is trying to support more and more of using those participation plans and keeping kids in. What do they need? You know, is the classroom too loud? Are they overloaded sensory? You know, well, we have accommodations for that, right? We can support those kind of things. May take a little time, and it may, you know, the work may be hard and heavy, but we can do it. So those are just kind of some things that I think about in participation, and thinking about how it's really changed over the last few years.
Mhm, mhm. And the thing that I do want to emphasize, you mentioned, you know, how individuals are being trained, how our teachers are being trained in the university. We have an individual in the person of Dr. Cindy Collado, who is really providing a lot of support, and will be visiting our classrooms to really look at these pieces, you know, looking at access, looking at participation. And then lastly, but not least, is the next one, just supports, which we've been talking about. So supports really include a range of things. It's the very broad spectrum of supports. So for example, do our teachers have ongoing professional development? I can say yes, they do have access to ongoing professional development. Are there incentives for our inclusion preschool teachers? Yes. Some of that incentives comes in the, some of the incentives come in the form of, again, providing them all of the needs that they may have, in terms of providing a quality program for their youngsters. Are there opportunities for communication and collaboration among families? Yes. I think some of our parents on this particular presentation can say that you've had regular engagement with individuals here at Twin Rivers Unified School District on the special education side, as well as those teachers that work on the general ed side, and also access to and collaborating, communicating, I should say, with administrators, teaching staff and service providers, collaborating and hearing from them in terms of how your child is progressing. So all of the supports that are available to our youngsters, we really want to make certain that they're well coordinated, that they are well facilitated, and that our children have the access to the supports, which will in turn support their participation in our preschool classrooms. Any thoughts coming from families in terms of how supports look? How can we do better? How might we improve in terms of providing the necessary supports to both you and your youngster? Any thoughts?
Maybe to get a new speech therapist at Garden Valley.
Okay. Are we missing a speech
Yeah,
therapist?
we're working, Miss
Hillary?
Archuleta. I'll check in with our director. I know we're working on, we had a resignation there. So yes, we're actively working on that, but thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. Okay, I think we can go on. Any other thoughts around access, participation, and supports? Any other thoughts? All right.
Well, I don't need any extra like support for now. I think we are pretty satisfied with the support that we are currently getting. I just wanted to show you guys appreciation, like how much my son is enjoying the school, and the teacher that we have for special ed, she knows my son really well, and I could tell that she tried to get to know my son like really, really well. And then whenever we get to we have a chance to talk to each other, that just shocked me almost, that like she knows like who he is, and that that's very important to me, because so that she can work on what we are dealing with, and that eventually it's gonna make my life easier, or like our life easier. So I just wanted to say thank you.
Well, that's great. That's great to hear. Thank you. Thank you for sharing.
You're welcome.
All right, the next slide, please. All right, so just a little inclusion preschool gallery walk, so that you can see what our preschool classrooms look like last year. We didn't have an opportunity yet to take any pictures for this year, but we will as time progresses, and hopefully we'll be able to showcase those pictures. So here are some of our teachers engaging with our youngsters that are actually enrolled in our inclusion classrooms. And as you can see, it looks very preschool to me, and it looks very, very supportive. And the one-on-one is just a wonderful opportunity to really embed instruction or provide the very specific support that a child needs. Okay, here is another, oh, I think we skipped one. Herberto, we need to go back, I think.
These are the ones we skipped.
Oh, is that the, okay. Again, you know, classrooms look a little different because of the COVID. And so children are asked to sort of, you know, to some degree, we're trying to maintain social distancing. It pretty much is working in our preschool classrooms, but these are other examples of our preschool classrooms. As you can see, many of our children are doing very well in terms of wearing their masks and so forth. But again, this is probably a time when children are engaging, to my left, they're engaging in circle time. And so as you can see, all of the youngsters are there. So whether a child has an IEP or not, they are included in that very special time when children gather in a circle and they're learning a particular about a particular concept, or someone is reading a book to them, or they might be engaging in a dance or something like that or another. And then you see the two little fellows over there with the thumbs up. All right. I think we missed this one here. Yes. This is another preschool class. And again, if we were in sort of normal times, quote unquote, we would have the youngsters would be all sitting around the table. So instead of just two youngsters, and as you could see, the children are maintaining a certain degree of social distancing. In the future, we're hoping as things get better and as things improve, we'll be able to sort of bring the children together. And so while they're having their lunch, we would typically have family style, and the teacher would be in the midst of them, and so forth and so on. But again, these are just some snapshots of our inclusion classrooms and children engaging in a variety of activities and experiences. Another shot there of our children. And again, trying to maintain the social distancing. It's working for now. We're doing pretty good in that regard. Even playing outside, we are looking forward to the opportunity of putting a playground at Vineland. And so for those of you that may have a child enrolled at Vineland, that is coming. Everything's been delayed. I'm sure you heard about the backlog with regard to supplies and equipment coming into this country. And it is a nationwide problem right now, but hopefully we'll be able to install the new playground at Vineland sooner or later. And then you see a child there reading a storybook. So pulling it together, again, the what of inclusion. Again, we see the ability of children, not the disability. And that's a key thing. We want to always presume competence, that every child is competent. That is a very, very important thought to bear in mind when we're thinking about inclusion. And children learning and growing together. That's what it's about. All children learning and growing together. And we also recognize and understand that inclusion for every single child, whether the child has an IEP or not, is a journey, is a journey. The why of inclusion, it's a great benefit for all children. It promotes equity and fairness and understanding, and many of you have already talked about that. It cultivates or it supports a sense of belonging for all children and a sense of community and a sense of collaboration. It bolsters children's developmental growth in all the domains, so meaning it really increases and improves their development in the area of their social development, their emotional development, their cognitive or their thinking development, and of course their physical development as well. And it increases program quality. I think Hillary is going to talk a little bit more about the why of inclusion as well.
Yeah, and we just, I'm lucky enough. I have mostly, I work with preschool this year, but my time at Twin Rivers, I've had, and prior to Twin Rivers, worked preschool through age 22, and so I get to see some of our students that I had when they were little. Some of them are in high school, some of them are in our adult transition program. But really inclusive, we know that educating students in their home neighborhoods or, really getting them to build those peer relationships early has a long lasting effect on students and their outcomes. We tend to think with outcomes that it's all academic, but I think Wanda did a great job of, talking about all the domains here, that it really is the whole student that we're concerned about. So we want them to have great social emotional skills. We want to increase, their cognitive skills, but we can do so in these settings. And then, and I know you guys have talked about this with your comments, inclusive settings builds empathy with general education peers. Makes for great adults. It makes for people that are understanding in the workforce. Our district several years ago did a pretty comprehensive research study with Sac State, where we matched students in inclusive settings here with students who were sent to separate settings, and they followed them through the years, all the way through high school. And it's a pretty impactful study when you see the outcomes of the students that went in inclusive model versus the students that were in a self-contained setting. It's kind of, it hurts me to see it still. But, we had students that started in the same setting in preschool, and one was given opportunities with all the supports that we've talked about, had very limited verbal skills, and ended up graduating high school and going to American River College with really no system of communication when he started. His peer that he was matched with, same kind of opportunities, through the IEP team, and parent input went in a different direction, had very different outcomes. That is just one of the cases that we studied here in Twin Rivers. But that one sticks out to me and is very impactful. And this individual is often asked, and some of our Twin Rivers peers, to go and speak at some of these conferences because his outcome was so good. So just remembering that, the journey's long, but the outcomes outcomes go throughout the lifespan, even when they leave us. So you being an important voice in your kids, in your students' education, to advocate for things and ask these kind of questions at the IEPs as they move forward.
Right. So I think really what we can say, just in a nutshell, inclusion works. So I think that is really the point that we want to get across this morning. All right, the next slide. Thank you, Hillary. All right, access, participation, and supports the how. Okay. Parent videos.
Right. Sorry, guys, I was trying to unmute. So we have just a few more slides, but this is just a parent's view of inclusion. So I'll let Heriberto start it and we'll just watch.
At 6 months old, the neurologist told us that Lydia had a stroke in the left hemisphere of her brain and a diagnosis of cerebral palsy, which affected the motor coordination, the sensory experience for her right side of her body. He said she would probably not walk, most likely would never talk. But you know, the brain has a lot of plasticity at this early age. We support her development by providing her with opportunities that every other child is provided with, making sure she's very involved in the community. We spend a lot of time at the parks, a lot of time at the library. I kind of decided that what I was going to do is I was going to immerse her and surround her with as many typical peers as I could to give her the model and the motivation to be just like every other kid. And she has followed suit with my plan and has kept up with all her peers. She does things a little differently for herself and she makes up her own little modifications, but she doesn't miss out on anything. More than anything, I want Lydia to be comfortable in her life with her peers and her friends and her family. And so from the very beginning, I started looking at community activities that she could be involved in and be with typical peers and learn from typical peers. So at 4 months old, I had her going to the library for baby rhyme time. And we would be in a room with a bunch of babies, clapping our hands and singing songs. And then I started taking her to the preschool story times. So she was with older kids in the library, sitting on the carpet square, clapping her hands, listening to the story. And she's such an observer that she really has taken the reins. I kind of put her on a path and then she goes running down it. So at the library, she would watch the other kids and want to do what they were doing. And that was the most important thing to me, that she have the motivation and the perseverance to keep up with her peers. And she's done that. And her being in a classroom full of children with all sorts of abilities has just enhanced that experience. So starting at the parks and the libraries and then now being in school, she doesn't know she's any different, and 99.9% of people in public don't know she's any different either until I share with them. And I share a lot. I'm an open book in public. People ask me, or kids ask, because she wears a brace on her hand and she wears a brace on her foot. So in that way, there's a visual for people to see, oh, what's happening there? And when I get the kind of quizzical looks, I'm happy to share. She had a stroke. It's harder for her to use her right arm and her right leg. And these supports really help her to straighten out her muscles and allow her to move her body the same way that you move your body. And the response I get from kids is like, oh, okay. They think she got hurt or there's some sort of injury because she has a brace on her arm. But when I tell her it's just like to help her, they pay no mind to it. And I like that curiosity, and I always thank people. Thank you for asking about that, because I'm glad that you know about it. And I'm gonna teach Lydia that throughout her life, to share her story and to tell people what is going on with her and her body and to feel empowered in that. She's a child that needs more support, but I see her running right along with all her peers in every way. I see her playing sports. I see her in a typical classroom. I see her sharing her experience with other kids, and if she needs a modification, a different type of pencil grip or help with scissoring or things like that, I see that as just a small thing. I don't think it's gonna make a huge difference in her life. And I think it will be great for not only her to be at peace with needing those supports, but I think it will be great to show her peers that it's okay for different people to need different things to succeed. The fact that she's been included starting at really 6 months old at the point of diagnosis has been profoundly impactful in her success.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Roundtree and Ms. Hillary Talmadge. Yes, so one of the things that we have mentioned to our families via the messages that we've sent is that we will be providing a tote bag with books for your participation to share with your children. So these are some of the list of the books that were recommended. We will purchase these around Thursday, and it'll probably take about a couple months for it to receive on our end, and then we will mail these to you, mostly probably via mail to your address. And then we will also provide some of these copies for our preschool inclusion classrooms as well. And this will be a tote bag with some books, maybe like a lanyard, some pencils, and some materials such as school supplies as well. And then we do actually have some preschool readiness books that we could send out to you now. So we'll probably ship those out in the next week or so after we have our second session on Wednesday. And then this is here, let me copy this. The survey that I will be sending out to you as well via email. And if you are able to complete it right now, this is where you can complete it and provide your feedback regarding this preschool inclusion workshop.